Hi everyone! In today's video I'm going to be making something for the attic space in my Tudor doll's house. And when I first started I wasn't really sure what I was going to make. So I decided to get some of the spare items that I already had in my cupboard out, and I decided to have a little look in my garage to hopefully find some inspiration. My flowers are getting so big in my garden now that they're growing out onto the path, but they look spectacular when they come into bloom, so I'm not going to trim them back. In my garage, or my little potting shed, I had this vase of dried poppy heads and dried alliums from last year. I'm glad I've kept them, because I knew that they were going to come in handy. So I decided to take them inside and have a look through all of my old doll's house furniture to come up with something new. So I actually have 3 doll's houses and a 12th scale shop. You can see some of them on my piano in the background. But I've only started working on the one doll's house so far, my Tudor doll's house. But all of the doll's houses came with some second-hand furniture, which I've kept just in case it would come in handy one day for upcycling. So I decided to have a little sort through to see what I had and to see if there was anything that I could transform and take back to the Tudor era. I had a little look at these chairs and wondered if I could put some different backs on them and maybe some different arms. But they're such a nice set that I've decided at the moment I'm just going to leave them as they are. I had a look through this bag of smaller items. Not all of these items came with the doll's houses. I picked up some of them at the York Doll's House Fair a year or so ago. In particular, this little piece of metal I think would make a really nice Tudor sword to go up on the wall of my doll's house. I saw similar when I went to, I think it was Hardwick Hall, which is a National Trust property, and I thought actually I'd quite like to replicate it for the wall of one of my rooms in my doll's house. I also had these little glasses. Now, inside this one appears to be some sort of white blue tack. I don't know if this is maybe, I know you can get some sort of, is it called tacky wax or something like that for holding doll's house items in place? So it might be that, but I can't get it out. It's well stuck in. I really tried to get it out, but I couldn't. Any advice on how to get this out would be greatly appreciated. I suppose these aren't really called glasses because they're not made of glass, they're made of metal. I haven't put them out in my Tudor doll's house yet. They seem a little bit off scale to me, but I'm not sure. I might lay them out on the banqueting hall table, we'll see. Also in this bag I had a selection of doll's house rugs. In particular, I really like this one. I think this would fit well in my Tudor doll's house. But maybe as something that isn't a rug, maybe a wall hanging, or a piece of material to go over the bed, or a curtain. Also in this bag I had some little sacks which I decided to go straight into the kitchen of my doll's house. If you followed my previous videos, you'll know that I've already got some sacks in my kitchen, so I'm hoping that these ones will go alongside them. When I opened my doll's house door, all of my items had fallen over. Well, not all of them, but a couple of them, because I'd moved my doll's house from one place to another, and some of the items had got knocked over. So I decided to have a little bit of a tidy up before putting the kitchen sacks into place. My mum made these sacks for me that contain the carrots and the apples, and I've put the sacks that I just had in my bag at the back of the kitchen. Can you see them? They're a little bit bigger than the ones that I had in the first place. After placing the sacks in the kitchen and having a general tidy up in my doll's house, I returned to continue looking at the items, and I found this bed. Now obviously, this bed won't fit in a doll's house that's staged in the Tudor era. But I wondered if I could use it to make my own bed. I already have made a bed for my doll's house, and it's in a previous video if you'd like to watch. And I used the poppy heads that I had stored in my lean-to, in my potting shed, and I was wondering whether maybe I could use them again. I then found this second bed, and I decided that perhaps I could put them both together to make a Tudor 4-poster bed. Obviously, the heart on the headboard wasn't really fitting of the era, so I was going to have to do some, some DIY, some crafting. I decided to take this mattress off. It was really stuck down well. As you can see, it was stuck down so well that I couldn't get it all off. It had a bit of a cardboard backing on it, and that was what was stuck so well. Oh, I wondered if I could remove the headboard if it wasn't stuck down very well. And whilst just gently pushing against it, the top bit actually pinged off. Now, this is probably the point where I should definitely say, please do not try this at home. You shouldn't try pressing a piece of wood to break it. It's dangerous, you could get splinters, you could hurt yourself. That just happened to ping off really easily by accident. So I had a quick tidy up, because I then realised that I hadn't taken any before pictures. And actually, I probably should have done, because I was hoping that I was going to transform this bed from the 2 beds that I already had into a Tudor 4-poster bed. So I wanted to be able to look back at the before and then the after. Throughout making this doll's house bed, I had to stop and have lots of mini tidy up sessions because I kept making quite a mess. So I had the white bed, I had the middle bed, and I also had the little rug that I'd kept to one side. As the headboard had come off so easily, I wondered if the other end would come off just as easily. Again, please do not copy me. Don't try this technique at home. I used my Stanley knife just to neaten off the edge here. Just as I say in all of my videos, please don't copy my techniques because I don't know the safest way to do things. I'm also very clumsy and I would hate for someone to copy how I do things and to hurt themselves. So this is just me showing you what I did, a bit like a diary entry. It's not me showing you how to do it. Definitely do not copy me. You might have just noticed that the base of the bed had a price sticker on it. So it said £22 for the set of 5 items. So I'm assuming that when this was first bought for a doll's house, it was bought as a set of 5 pieces. I have noticed some little bedside tables that maybe match the set. I did feel a little bit sad that I'd maybe broken up the set, but actually I was hoping that this was going to turn a couple of pieces of furniture into one piece of furniture that I really loved that would have pride of place in my Tudor doll's house. I'm sorry I've not filmed this bit so well. I've kind of chopped it off the edge of the screen, but all I was doing here was putting a line of glue along the edge so that I could stick it to the other bed that was now stood up vertically that I was going to use a bit like a headboard. I held it in place for a minute just until it had gripped, and I was using Yoo-hoo glue that dries nice and quickly, but not so quickly that you can't reposition it if you need to. I have this tiny little spirit level and it used to be my granddad's, and it was perfect for just laying onto the bed to check that I'd positioned it correctly. So when I previously made a 4-poster bed for my Tudor doll's house, I used these poppy seed heads as the feet. And these are the actual ones that I'd collected last year to make the bed. We're about a year on now, just under a year. And I've noticed that some of the poppy seed heads have started to turn sort of into skeletons of the poppy seed heads, and they're absolutely beautiful. I always think the structures in nature are just incredible. Now then, I decided that for this project, again, I was going to try and use some of the parts of the poppy seed heads as the feet of the bed, and I liked the fact that it would match my other bed, but I wasn't going to make it identical. I saved these poppy seed heads from the poppies in my garden from last year, and the type of poppy that they are, I'm not actually sure what its name is, but they're huge, they're really big poppies when they're in bloom. I actually have some in bloom in my garden at the moment, so I plan on saving them once they've finished and keeping them so that they dry out ready to use next year. Now, when I posted my last video on how I made my Tudor bed, I did have some comments saying that in some countries you don't have these poppy flowers. So, I mean, obviously I've already said don't copy how I'm doing this anyway, but if you are doing a similar project, I'm sure you'll be able to find something else that has a nice fancy decoration to it. I think if I hadn't have had the poppy seed heads, I would have maybe used some beads for the feet of my bed and for decoration on my bed. I decided to use some cardboard. I had to interrupt my cat who had fallen asleep inside the box, but I decided to use some cardboard to try and make the top of my four-poster bed, because the four-poster bed in the Tudor era tended to have sort of like a roof, a canopy over the top of it. I did start by just drawing around the headboard to work out the width, and then drawing a line along the side of my cutting mat to work out how long it needed to be, but then I did go and find my ruler because I thought it was probably worth investing the time and effort into actually measuring properly. At this point, I thought that my bed was all going well. However, when I made this canopy, as you'll see in a moment, I wasn't actually that pleased with it. I'll tell you why in a second. So when I laid this over the top of my bed, I thought it didn't look nicely finished, and I thought that actually you wouldn't just kind of have a plank of wood, it would probably be a little bit more 3D, a little bit thicker and have edges. So I decided to lay my piece of card over a piece of watercolour card, and then I just carefully cut around it so that there was about a centimetre edge running all the way around the edge of the thicker piece of card. I started to cut a little tab on each corner, but the piece of card in the middle kept slipping. So actually I then stopped after cutting one tab and decided to glue the thicker piece of card down so that it didn't move around. Once the thicker piece of card was stuck in place, I continued to cut out a tab on each corner. And I also gently scored down each edge, so I'm not cutting here, I'm just really gently pressing so that it made it easier to fold the edge. So the only places that I cut here was just here on each of the four corners to make a little tab. I then folded each of the sides up to try and make a box shape. The tabs were used to pop the glue on, and I folded them under so that they could connect to the next side of the box. So as you can see there, I was just scoring along to make it easier to fold. I popped the lid back onto the craft knife whilst I wasn't using it, and I folded each side up and then connected it with a little bit of the glue. In a second, you'll notice that to hold the sides, or I should say the corners, in place, I did use a peg just so that it would hold it in place whilst I was gluing the next corner down. And what would have been much better to use to do this would have been the tiny little craft pegs that you can get for hooking up Christmas cards. but I didn't have any, so I used full-size pegs instead. Once this was all dry, I placed it over the bed and had a look to see what it was like. I also decided that I needed to make the posts that held the top of the bed up. So I had this allium from last year, and I used the allium stalks last year on the bed that I'd already made for each of the posts. This time I felt like the allium stalks were a little too thick for the posts at the front of the bed, so instead I sanded down this poppy stalk and I decided to use this. I trimmed down 2 pieces of the poppy stalk to the same length, and then I decided to embellish them. I'd studied some pictures of Tudor beds and I'd noticed that some of the wood was carved into a spiral shape. So I decided to pop a little bit of glue onto the poppy stalk, and then I twisted some string around. This was all an experiment, it wasn't something that I'd tried before. I did this to both of the poppy stalks so that I would have the 2 posts to go at the foot of the bed. I was concerned that it just looked like a piece of string wrapped around a twig, so I decided to actually double up the thickness of the string and spiral it around this poppy stalk again to make it a little bit thicker. Here's a comparison of the stalk on the left that has the double thickness of string and the stalk on the right that only has a single thickness of string. Which one do you think will be better? Let me know in the comments. I felt that the double thickness of string would be better, so I did this to both of the poppy stalks, and then I decided to make 2 slightly thicker stalks. I decided to use 2 slightly thicker stalks, the allium stalks, at the back for wider posts at the back of the bed. So I used exactly the same technique, but for these posts, seeing as they were a little bit wider, I decided to add a thickness of 3 pieces of string for the swirl going around. In real life, I felt like I'd done this really quickly, but watching the footage back, I've realised that actually I think I was going quite slowly to make sure that it was going in the right position and so that each swirl was evenly spaced out. They dried fairly quickly, so then I popped some glue on the top and some glue on the headboard and stuck them into place. At this point, I did feel like the bed was starting to take shape, and it no longer looked like two different beds that had been stuck together. I added some more parts of the poppy seed heads as some little embellishments, as feet at the bottom of the base of the bed at the back. And then I put the top of the bed back in place. However, when I put it on, I really felt like the size wasn't correct. To me, it looked too wide. Would you agree? I felt like the bottom of the bed was a lot narrower than the top, but the reason for this was because the headboard at the back was wider than the base of the bed. So I decided to put a single piece of card on top to see if this helped the proportions. Obviously that wasn't trimmed to the width that I needed it to be trimmed to, but I still wasn't sure. So instead I decided to add some more poppy stalks here, just to make a frame around the top of the bed where the curtains could hang. If I hadn't had dried poppy stalks for this bit, I could have used some dowel or perhaps some straws. However, I absolutely love how the poppy seed heads aren't perfectly straight. Because this is a Tudor bed and it's meant to be really old, I really like the fact that it's not perfectly straight and that there are some twists and wobbles. Now this little rug, I decided maybe I could use it as the curtains to hang over the curtain poles on the bed frame. Now it wasn't quite long enough to cut in half to have on each side of the bed and drape right to the floor, but I decided to cut it in half anyway because I have some more fabric that I thought I could add to it to make it a little bit longer. But when I cut it and held it up to the bed like this, I decided that I wasn't so sure anymore because it's quite a rigid piece of fabric. It's not really soft and flowy like a curtain would be. So I put it to one side and decided that I would come back to it later. Again, I tested out what I should put on the top of my bed because I still wasn't decided on whether to use this sticker top or a single sheet of card, or nothing at all. I decided to have a break from thinking about the top of the bed, and instead I embellished the sides and the front and also a little bit at the top of the bed. This was really simple to do. All I was doing was cutting my strips of watercolour card and then sticking them to the structure of the bed, and I was trying to make a panelling effect. I used this technique before when I made my last bed and also when I've made some other pieces of furniture for the doll's house. Feel free to have a look back through my previous videos. I have a whole playlist of everything that I've made so far. I decided to add some more poppy seed heads for feet. I didn't use the full heads, I was just using the flat base or the flat top of them as the base for my feet because I thought that actually using the whole poppy seed head would add a little bit too much height for this bed. Due to the fact that I still felt like the top of the bed looked too wide, I decided to maybe add some more poles further out at the side at the front because I thought this might extend the width of the bed at the front. But I still wasn't sure, so I decided to place it into the room where it was going to be to see if this would help me to decide on the proportions. Now, it was difficult to get to this room in my doll's house. It's at the back of the doll's house next to my wall. and I can't lift my doll's house and move it by myself, so I had to squeeze into the back of the doll's house and have a look at this angle. When I put it in place, I realised with the top of the bed on, it didn't fit. It was sticking out in the corner. So this made a decision for me. I had to remove the top of the bed, and it was going to basically have to not have a top on it. It fit perfectly when I removed the top of the bed. I finished off adding some decoration to the top part of this bed now that I'd decided that there was going to be no canopy, no roof over it. And I also did a similar design on each side of the bed. I felt like it was really taking shape at this point. What do you think? I also felt like it needed something to go along the top because at the moment it looked unfinished. So I decided to make another strip of card that went all the way around with a similar design on it. Because although the roof of the bed was going to be open at the top, I just felt like it needed something to finish it off around the top. And this is what it looked like when I'd finished that part. Then it was time to get painting, so I painted it with my raw umber acrylic paint that I've used for so many pieces of furniture in my doll's house. Some of the parts of the white bed that had already been painted white, I think maybe were painted with a gloss. It took a couple of coats of this acrylic to cover it completely. Once it was dry, I sat with my mum and started to have a look at the fabrics that we've got because of course the next stage will be to make a mattress and the bedding and the curtains for the bed. So at this point, the bed is almost finished. I will probably add some gold embellishments just to add some highlights to the decoration on the bed, but I'll do that when I know that the acrylic has really fully dried. And then I will be working with the fabrics to make all of the mattress and the bedding and the curtains and all those little extras that will make it look finished off. So for now, this is what it looks like. Ta-da! It took me it took me a day to make this, minus a few hours. I did go out in the middle of it. But it was starting to get dark now, so I decided to pop things away and I will leave this to finish off next weekend. So thank you so much for watching. Please do come back in the next episode to have a look to see the completely finished bed. Let me know that you've been by leaving a comment, and I'll see you next time.